we've been talking about a new earth for 7 weeks, and this is our final week of this 7-week series, and we're wrapping it up because I've checked in with everyone, and you all seem to be enlightened. So why go on, beating an alive horse? Um, so there's so much in this particular volume. It's really something that's sort of a manifesto for spiritual growth that you could take and work with for years on end, literally. And many of you have. Many of you have shared. You've read the book several times. It's something that you refer back to. It's sort of a touchstone of remembering. So I encourage you to continue in any way that serves you. I certainly have. But I thought it would be good today, as we wrap up the series, is to kind of remember where we started, and really, as in all truth, the Alpha and the Omega are the very same thing. Where we came from, what we are originally, essentially, is the destination for spiritual practice, and whatever journey we're on is a journey from a home and to a home we never left. And the way the New Earth describes this is it takes its title, A New Earth, from Scripture in the Old and the New Testament to talk about the collapse of the existing world order and the arising of a new heaven and a new earth. Of course, we need to understand, we do in Unity and New Thought, that when we talk about heaven, we're not talking about a location, but we're referring to an inner realm of consciousness. That is the new heaven that we are wanting to bring into manifestation, into realization. So that is also the esoteric meaning of heaven, according to Jesus. When Jesus talked about heaven, he was not talking about some location apart from any of us or some destination after death. He was talking about an inner realm of consciousness, and the kingdom of heaven, he said, is at hand, obviously referring to something immediate, something accessible, something right here, right now, and saying that the kingdom of heaven is within us. So when we understand that the heaven that you and I are seeking to realize is not something that's separated from us in time or in space, and that brings us to the power of now. Power of now. The power is in this moment. The power is in collapsing the tendency for you and I to project a preferred reality to some time and space apart from here and now. Time and space, these notions, time particularly, is the enemy of spiritual awakening. It's the antithesis of the awakened state of love and peace and wholeness, all of which are contained within this inner realm of consciousness that is the heaven that is here and now. Yes? Yes, and we know this conceptually, and there is a journey for us to take, and the journey is to take it from the head, from a concept, which we go, oh yes, I get that, I really get that. It really seems right that heaven is not a place somewhere out there, that heaven is what I really am. But there's a vast difference in experience between that as a concept and to the knowing of that, in letting that be infused in our very consciousness, in our knowingness, in a immediate sense. And it's sort of the difference between seeing your birth certificate and being hugged by your mother. So Jesus said, as above, so below. And what he meant by that, of course, is what we hold in consciousness, what we know to be true in this place of awareness, then can infuse what we do, our actions, our behavior, how we show up in life, the doing of life. And there's a quote that I really like, and I actually had to dig back into the talk that I gave when I was in ministerial school 20-some years ago, and I had started my talk with this quote. You cannot stay on the summit forever. You have to come down again. So why bother in the first place? What is above knows what is below. But what is below does not know what is above. One climbs, one sees, one descends, one sees no longer. But one has seen. There is an art of conducting oneself in the lower regions by the memory of what one has seen higher up. Let me repeat that. There is an art of conducting oneself in the lower regions by the memory of what one has seen higher up. When one can no longer see, one can at least still know. What is the value of spiritual practice? Why do we do this? Why do we come to communities like this? Is it just so that we have a hit, just a glimpse? Or is it because we're actually reforming our consciousness incrementally with each word of truth, with each inspired song, with each prayer, with each inward recognition and realization of something deeper and truer about ourselves? This is how it works for most of us. There are very rare people who have had that enlightened moment in which they became fully awakened and realized and never returned to the ego-mind awareness. Very few. Most of us, it is a gradual progression of this recognition that we do need to go to the mountaintop again and again, whatever that is for us. And that even though we may not be able to have the mountaintop experience on a regular basis, the ego mind would just love to jump on that, right? Because the ego mind likes to go, can I just go from epiphany to epiphany to epiphany to epiphany? And, skip these things, the valleys, experiences, though I walk through the valley of the shadow. Can we just skip the valleys and just do the peaks, the peak experiences? That's what the ego mind would want us to do. And yet, it is something like, it's sort of something like this. I'm remembering, and I'm fully remembered. I'm forgetting. Oh, but wait, I'm remembering. I'm forgetting. So it's remembering and forgetting. It's the game the human being plays in this. It's the play of consciousness. It's the play of the divine. It's the play of this human divine journey that we're on. And it's not there's nothing wrong with us, It's not that old time religion, where you say that we're sinful or we're bad or we're unworthy or we're tarnished. It's just that we forget. And all of this struggling to learn is really just to remember. To remember what we already know in our heart of hearts. What we are, whose we are, the truth of being. We already know this. And the cloudiness comes from the ego mind, the self that we made up apart from God. It's not a real self. It has no real reality. It only has a appearance reality. And when we go to the mountaintop, when we go to have a great meditation, or we hear a certain word, and then this false sense of self gets very thin and wispy, and it begins to drop away from the consciousness, and the consciousness then beholds the light. The light of consciousness then sees clearly. Jesus called it the light of the world. He said, you are the light of the world. You are, that's what you are. That's what I am. And don't judge by appearances. And appearances are that you're some human being with just a very limited notion of self and biography and stuck in time and space and destined to suffer and be without. But you are not that. I am not that. We are this unlimited being. That is what we are. Every master teacher has glimpsed this, seen this, in their own mountaintop experience, and have come down from the mountain and have written the scriptures, have related this story to us. What they have seen, and we have either seen ourselves or we can trust in that because it already resonates with something in us that we know to be true. When you read this book, A New Earth, or any spiritual book, if there's a part of you that knows that this is true, you have already begun to awaken. If there's any part of you that sees the truth in these teachings, you are already starting to peel away this false sense of being. And it's coaxing that light, it's coaxing that true identity forward through our spiritual practice that makes it more clear and clarifying and real for us. So when we can no longer see, we can still at least know. And then it becomes a matter of how do we take this spiritual understanding and live our lives, because we just can't hang out on the mountaintop all the time. How many of you have ever, you don't have to raise your hand, but how many of you have ever thought, I just want to go off to an ashram somewhere and just live and not have to deal with this and these people and that situation? And, I have thought that so many times, like this, just put me in the bubble of sacredness. And I'll be fine. I know I'll be fine. And then I can really work on my spirituality, because how am I supposed to work on my spiritual growth out here with you guys? Are you kidding? No, I need to surround myself by light beings, When they look at me, they see Christ, they see Buddha, they see the light. They just see my light. And I'm sure I'll see theirs too, because that's how it works, right? But then you get to hear these stories about these spiritual communities, and Ananda is not always Ananda in the communities, right? I mean, we just know people are people, and we're all still working it out. Even the most enlightened spiritual teachers have their shadows, yes? Yes, we hear these stories, and some are very open and forthcoming with them, and others are not. But we have to find a way to make this, and Unity prides itself on making this a spiritual journey that it has practical application, that this is practical spirituality, which means that you don't just have to, just not in the sacred spaces in which we only feel the presence, but how do we feel that presence in the ordinary moments of doing life, yes? I mean, that's where the proverbial rubber meets the road. That's where the spiritual ideal takes form and becomes that which informs our doing of life. And that's what we're going to talk about today, if I ever get there. It's coming, though. I'm getting close. I feel it. It's coming. I'm coming down off the mountaintop. Whoa. But I don't want to leave the mountaintop. Jesus, he had this pattern. He would go away up into the mountaintop to pray, right? Even when the crowds were still pressing on him, even when there was still work to do, even when his to-do list was plenty long, he found a way. He withdrew, it would say. He withdrew from the crowds. There was still a lot of work. You hear what I'm saying? There was still stuff to do. He withdrew from the crowds and went up to the mountaintop to pray. It said this multiple times in the scripture. This is a very awake individual who has this practice. See, there's something about a balance. As long as we're in this form, we have to find a way of balancing this spiritual life with the doing of life. It's not just to be human doings, we know that. But it's also not just to be being without bringing that awareness of what we are, that spiritual truth, into the energy of this world to make our contributions to the new earth. See, it's not a new heaven. It's not you and I just getting this consciously and then just, kind of sitting in our room and trying to shield ourselves from the world because we're afraid that, they might push the pin in our balloon, They might deflate this enlightened state. But take whatever we have, and bring that into service to the world. God knows the world needs every enlightened perspective that you can bring to it. I call it spiritually infused doing. My sister's birthday came up recently, and I was trying to figure out what to get for her. And she, like many of us, has everything she needs. But I thought about what is it might be unique of what she enjoys. And she's someone who likes to put a little fruit juice in water and buys these, rather elaborate drinks that are fruit juice infused water. And there's a new thing, some of you may know about this. It's a water bottle that has a central core that has little holes in it, and you put fruit, any kind of fruit, in the central core, and then fill the bottle up with water. And so then the fruit then infuses the water. It's very subtle, but you can put any fruit that you want in there. So I thought, oh, that's perfect for her. And I thought, what a wonderful metaphor. See, is that we do this work. We imbibe this consciousness of truth in all these different forms, and through our prayer and meditation and our studies. And as that becomes sort of the central core of our being, then we pour forth through our doing what we really are. We bring the enlightened consciousness that is the truth of our being, and we bring that into expression. And that is our mission statement. To realize, which is to infuse the being consciousness, and then express it in the world. That's the infused doing formula. So it doesn't just end with the spiritual work. It's to take the new consciousness and then bring it into expression, yes? In our lives. And we're going to get some chances to do this. The holidays are coming up, yes? Don't we know what's... Oh my God, what an opportunity to grow spiritually. Holy moly. A whole year's worth of work could come undone if we just forget who we are for a moment, yes? Yes, yeah. So we understand that, and Eckhart talks about this quite a bit in chapters 7 and 8. I think it's the last couple chapters of the book. He says that enlightened action always follows enlightened seeing, And Eric Butterworth always said that too. He says, it's not to set it right, it's to see it right. If you see it right, if you see rightly, then action follows that, just like the night follows the day follows the night. It's just, it follows. I'm going to talk in a minute about some ethical questions here too that somebody posed to me. Jesus had a lot of ways of saying this idea about first having this consciousness before you act in the world. He talked about giving your gift at the altar. He said, when you give your gift at the altar, first be reconciled with your brother. Before you give your gift, which is, we may think that's an act of spiritual practice, of piety, but any act of piety without a consciousness of unconditional love is not an effective spiritual practice. It will not raise your consciousness to God awareness. It's not what we do. It's why we do what we do. It's how we do what we do that makes it a real contribution, yes? And you know this. You've had people that have given you the most modest of gifts with great love, and you have felt love. You know people that have given you grandiose gifts with little heart, and you have not felt the value of that gift. We know it's how we infuse our giving, how we infuse our acts of service that determines whether we are expressing from God's self or we expressing from the ego self, the part of us that feels like we're just giving and it's taking from us with everything we give. But when we're giving from the true self, when we're giving from our whole self, any act of giving, any act of service, any act of sharing, any act of compassion expands the sense of being because we're giving to ourself when we're expressing our true self. Anytime I express love from a really authentic place, I am expanded. Yes? Do we know this? And when we're giving in a very meager way, in a very, feel like that our container is dropping, with every little thing we give, then we are being diminished by our gift. So this is such an important realization in this season in which there is an emphasis on giving. But before we pour from this heart, from this body, whatever it is that we have to share, let's make sure that we're infused with this sense of the presence, that's what fills us, that's at the core of what we are. Because then what we pour forth will come with the fragrance of love, with the nectar of well-being and peace and goodwill. And that's what we're here to expand in this world, yes? The world needs nothing more really now than your authentic self. You don't have to do great things. As the Mother Teresa said, you just need to do little things with what? With great love. Little things with great love. Her acts were small, minor. She would clean people who had soiled themselves day in and day out, 12, 15 hours a day, small things. But to be in her presence when she was doing these very minor acts of service, they said it was like the woman was 4 feet off the ground. She was so high on love. She was so infused with the presence and the power and the love of God that what she shared, no matter what it was in its form, its content was pure love. And she did not tire from her giving. We have this story in the scriptures about Jesus visiting Martha and Mary. And it's in Luke 10:38. As they were on their way, Jesus entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. And she had a sister named Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So she came to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken from her." We understand this is a story about, are we in the consciousness of love? Are we in the consciousness of truth? Are we in the consciousness of the Christ presence? Or are we in the consciousness of the ego that is always taking account of, look how much I'm doing and look how little she's doing, and our giving comes from a contracted state, yes? And Jesus is saying, first, be reconciled. Before you bring your gift, first be reconciled to the truth of your being. First, seek ye first the kingdom of God. Understand what you are. Claim your true identity. Know that, feel that, be centered in that, anchored in that. Let that be your profound awareness before you do anything in life. And we know that when that happens, when we're in the presence of someone who shares from that place, we feel the profound nature of their gift, even if the gift is small, even if it's just their presence. What a gift your presence can be at the Thanksgiving table if you're infused with love. If you bring a meager contribution to the meal, but your heart is filled with love. This is what you are. This is what I am. Sometimes this is no small thing to do. It may be the greatest contribution. It may be the highest bar you have ever set for what you bring to the table. And yet is the most profound realization that you can possibly have, that the gift of your presence has already been given to you unconditionally. And it waits upon you to realize it, to recognize it, to know it. It's already been given. You and I have this within us. So lastly, I wanted to share, I received an email question a couple of weeks ago from one of you as we were going through this series. And this person said, "The piece I'm a bit adrift on is the link between Tolley's model and the concept of universal love and empathic assistance to our fellows. For me, he beautifully establishes my universal linkage to the all and touches on love on page 105, but I wish there were more depth to the discussion." And so I replied back to him with his 750-page article that I had written on the topic at another time, and I will spare you most of those 750 words, but to give you the essence of that as we conclude. So there's a quote that I began with from Mencius, who was the grandson of Confucius. He says, "Just as water, unobstructed, will flow downhill, that we, given the chance to be what we are, will extend ourselves in kindness. So the real and the lasting practice for each of us is to remove what obstructs us so that we can be who we are, holding nothing back. If we can work toward this kind of authenticity, then the living kindness, the water of compassion, will naturally flow. We do not need discipline to be kind, just an open heart." Most of us resist and reject the moral systems, the religious systems that dictate our behavior as, the stone tablets of what we're supposed to do or what you should do. Most of us reject that. We value plurality of viewpoints over a strict dictum. And there's good in that because we know that it maintains this sense of independence of thought, that we can follow our own instincts. But if we are in a resistance to this sort of moral code, we might also be in resistance to this notion that we must not ever forget, and that is the interconnectedness of all life. Because it's the interconnectedness of all life that causes and calls you and I to be of conscious mind and heart to one another. Not because of some external code, because of some moral code, because someone says we should do this, because that's what good whatevers do, but for a deeper reason. So the last paragraph is this. Beyond or perhaps beneath the postmodern impulse to do as we please, which we all love, is an evolutionary impulse that motivates us from a deeper awareness of who we truly are and our relationship to the whole of life. As the boundaries of me and you dissolve, so will the notion of separate interests. This is the basis for an evolved morality in which clear, conscious understanding motivates clear and compelling right action. You can become more sensitive and recognize this thread of interconnectedness running through our lives and through our relationships. This alone might bring us to the height of ethical living, rooted not in the external maxims, but in our own internal knowing. It will probably also be the day in which we're the most free and the most happy. Namaste.